Old Hickory's twisted legacy, Andrew Jackson's reign of scandal and iron will. Hey, history buffs and seekers of raw, untamed power. What if a president, revered by millions as a champion of the common man, was also a ruthless duelist, a master of political intrigue, and at the center of some of the most explosive scandals in American history? What if his very rise to power was fueled by personal vendettas, and his legacy forever stained by actions that defy modern morality? Today, we're ripping open the astonishing, often brutal, saga of Andrew Jackson, America's 7th president. We'll peel back the layers of the common man myth to reveal the duels, the illicit love affair that rocked a nation, the chilling political plots, and the iron-fisted decisions that shaped a young republic. This isn't just about policy. It's a raw, unfiltered journey into the heart of a man who embodied the contradictions of early America. Get ready, because the true story of Andrew Jackson is a relentless tale of ambition, vengeance, and a legacy that still sparks heated debate today. Our story begins not in the refined halls of power, but in the untamed wilderness of the Carolina frontier. Born in 1767, Andrew Jackson was an orphan by his early teens, scarred by the brutal realities of the American Revolution. He carried lifelong physical reminders, saber cuts to his hand and head from a British officer, a searing hatred for the British, and a deep-seated suspicion of established elites. This harsh upbringing forged an unyielding will and a fierce independence that would define his entire life. Jackson clawed his way up, studying law, moving to the rough-and-tumble frontier of Tennessee, and quickly establishing himself as a formidable lawyer, planter, and soldier. He was a self-made man, a champion of the burgeoning West, who spoke the language of the common farmer and settler. His early military career solidified his image as Old Hickory, tough as nails, unyielding, and capable of enduring any hardship. He led his militia to decisive victories against Native American tribes and, most famously, against the British in the Battle of New Orleans in 1815, cementing his status as a national hero. Yet, even in his ascent, whispers followed him. His temper was legendary, exploding into fits of rage at the slightest provocation. He participated in numerous duels, often over matters of honor or slights against his beloved wife. The most infamous, in 1806, saw him deliberately allow his opponent, Charles Dickinson, to shoot him in the chest, the bullet lodged near his heart for life, before calmly returning fire and killing Dickinson. This wasn't just a man, it was a force of nature, a figure of terrifying resolve who demanded respect and exacted vengeance. This frontier justice, this personal code of honor, would follow him all the way to the highest office in the land, setting the stage for political battles as personal and brutal as any duel he ever fought. Before Andrew Jackson became president, his private life, specifically his marriage to Rachel Donaldson Robards, became the fuel for one of the nastiest political scandals in American history. It was a weapon used by his enemies, almost derailing his presidential ambitions and deeply scarring him. The gossip swirled around Rachel and Andrew like a venomous cloud. They married in 1791, believing Rachel was divorced from her first husband, Lewis Robards. However, it later emerged that Robards had not formally divorced her when she married Jackson. Their divorce was only finalized in 1793. This meant, technically, that for 2 years, Rachel had been married to 2 men, and her union with Jackson was, by legal standards, bigamous. Upon discovering this legal technicality, Andrew and Rachel immediately remarried in 1794, but the damage was done. Their political opponents, especially during his presidential campaigns, seized upon this scandal with ruthless glee. They branded Rachel a bigamist and an adulteress, and Andrew a man who had stolen another man's wife. Pamphlets and newspaper articles smeared her reputation with vile accusations, portraying her as an immoral woman and Jackson as a crude, dishonorable brute unfit for the presidency. The truth was far more nuanced. Rachel and Andrew genuinely believed she was legally divorced and acted in good faith. But in the cutthroat political arena of early America, facts often mattered less than perception. Jackson was fiercely protective of Rachel, and these attacks ignited his famous temper, leading to physical confrontations and, as we've seen, duels. The accusations, however unjust, took a severe toll on Rachel, who was a pious and private woman. Many historians believe the stress and heartbreak contributed to her premature death just weeks after Jackson's election in 1828. Jackson was convinced his political enemies had literally killed his wife with their slanders. This personal tragedy fueled his already burning desire for vengeance and shaped his approach to the presidency, leading him to trust few and fight relentlessly against those he perceived as his wife's tormentors. The Petticoat Affair and other personal slanders would become recurring themes throughout his presidency. Jackson's presidency, 1829 to 1837, was famously marked by the Petticoat Affair, also known as the Eaton Affair, a social and political scandal that vividly illustrates how personal gossip and rumors could cripple an administration. The central figure was Peggy Eaton, the vivacious and controversial wife of Jackson's Secretary of War, John Eaton. Peggy was known for her beauty, sharp wit, and a past that, like Rachel Jackson's, attracted scandal. She had been rumored to have had an affair with Eaton while her first husband was still alive. Washington, D.C. society, particularly the wives of cabinet members led by Floride Calhoun, wife of Vice President John C. Calhoun, ostracized Peggy. They refused to socialize with her, attend her parties, or invite her to theirs, effectively shutting her out of elite society. Jackson, fiercely defensive of Peggy due to the parallels with his own slandered wife, saw this as an attack on his administration. He demanded that his cabinet wives accept Mrs. Eaton. But the women, driven by social snobbery and perhaps genuine moral indignation, refused. The affair escalated, becoming a proxy battle for political power within Jackson's cabinet. Vice President Calhoun's ambition clashed with Secretary of State Martin Van Buren's cunning. Van Buren, a shrewd political operator and a widower with no wife to complicate matters, shrewdly befriended the Eatons, earning Jackson's unwavering loyalty. The Petticoat Affair ultimately led to a massive shake-up of Jackson's cabinet in 1831. Most members, including Calhoun, resigned or were dismissed. This allowed Jackson to replace them with loyalists, particularly Van Buren, who became his chosen successor. This event also cemented the power of Jackson's informal kitchen cabinet, a group of trusted, unofficial advisors who often met in the White House kitchen, bypassing the formal cabinet altogether. This scandal, fueled by gossip and personal vendettas, demonstrated Jackson's fierce loyalty, his willingness to wield presidential power to protect those he favored, and how deeply personal animosities could intertwine with national politics in the early republic. It was a drama worthy of a soap opera, playing out in the very heart of American governance. While Jackson championed the common man, his vision of who constituted the common man was tragically limited. One of the darkest chapters of his presidency, and a profound stain on his legacy, is the Indian Removal Act of 1830 and the subsequent forced displacement of Native American tribes from their ancestral lands in the southeastern United States. This was a policy driven by a ruthless pragmatism, racial prejudice, and an unyielding desire for land. The 5 civilized tribes, the Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Creek, and Seminole, had largely adopted many aspects of American culture, including farming, written languages, like the Cherokee syllabary, and even constitutional governments. The Cherokee Nation, in particular, sought to defend their sovereignty through legal means, taking their case all the way to the Supreme Court. In Worcester v. Georgia, 1832, Chief Justice John Marshall ruled in favor of the Cherokee, declaring that Georgia had no right to infringe on Cherokee sovereignty. Jackson's response was infamous, a direct challenge to the authority of the Supreme Court. John Marshall has made his decision, now let him enforce it. This quote, whether entirely accurate or partly apocryphal, perfectly encapsulates Jackson's contempt for judicial restraint when it conflicted with his agenda. He ignored the ruling, pushing forward with his policy of Indian removal. The culmination of this policy was the infamous Trail of Tears, 1838, which occurred shortly after Jackson left office but was a direct consequence of his actions. Under harsh military escort, tens of thousands of Native Americans were forcibly marched thousands of miles from their homes to Indian Territory, present-day Oklahoma. Thousands died from disease, starvation, and exposure along the way. This was not a military necessity born of war. It was a deliberate act of ethnic cleansing driven by land hunger and racial ideology. The Democratic champion of the common man presided over one of the most undemocratic and inhumane acts in American history, revealing the chilling paradox at the heart of his populism. The cries of the displaced, and the land they left behind, remain a powerful, haunting echo of his raw, often brutal, exercise of power. Andrew Jackson's presidency was also defined by his relentless war against the Second Bank of the United States, an institution he despised as a symbol of elitism, corruption, and a threat to democratic principles. He saw the bank, a private corporation with a federal charter, as a monopolistic entity controlled by wealthy northern bankers, holding too much power over the nation's financial system. His opposition to the bank was deeply personal, rooted in his distrust of paper money, creditors, and centralized financial power. Jackson launched a full-scale assault, using his immense popularity and executive power to dismantle the bank. He vetoed the bill to recharter it in 1832, portraying it as an un-American institution serving the wealthy few. He then went further, ordering the withdrawal of federal deposits from the bank and their redistribution to state banks, earning him the nickname King Andrew from his furious opponents who viewed his actions as tyrannical and unconstitutional. The bank war was a monumental clash between presidential power and financial interests, and Jackson emerged victorious, fundamentally reshaping the American economy. Simultaneously, Jackson faced another grave constitutional crisis, the nullification crisis of 1832 to 1833. South Carolina, led by his former Vice President John C. Calhoun, declared federal tariffs null and void within its borders, threatening secession from the Union. They argued that states had the right to nullify federal laws they deemed unconstitutional. Jackson, despite his states' rights leanings, saw this as a direct challenge to federal authority and the very integrity of the Union. His response was swift and uncompromising. He issued a forceful proclamation declaring nullification treasonous, sent federal troops and warships to Charleston, and threatened to hang Calhoun personally. "Our federal union," he famously declared, "it must be preserved." While a compromise tariff eventually diffused the immediate crisis, Jackson's unyielding stance demonstrated his readiness to use overwhelming force to assert federal power, showcasing the formidable and sometimes frightening extent of his presidential authority. These two crises highlight Jackson's willingness to challenge established norms, confront powerful interests, and use the full weight of the executive branch to achieve his objectives, even at the risk of civil war. So, what are we to make of Andrew Jackson, the fiery duelist who avenged his wife's honor, the champion of the common man who oversaw the brutal displacement of Native Americans, the uncompromising leader who battled banks and rebellious states? His story is a whirlwind of contradictions, a testament to a man who was both fiercely democratic in spirit and alarmingly autocratic in practice. His presidency undeniably expanded the power of the executive branch and championed a more populist vision of American governance, paving the way for the rise of the common man in politics. Yet, this very populism was built on exclusionary ideals, leading to the devastating Trail of Tears and the perpetuation of racial inequality. His willingness to flout judicial rulings and wield personal power set precedents that continue to be debated. Andrew Jackson's legacy is not simple. He remains a figure of intense fascination and heated argument, a mirror reflecting the inherent tensions and profound complexities of American history. He embodied the raw, untamed spirit of a young nation, driven by passion, loyalty, and a ruthless ambition that left an indelible and often unsettling mark. His story forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth. Sometimes, the most celebrated heroes are also capable of the deepest betrayals. What do you think of Andrew Jackson's complicated legacy? Was he a necessary force for democracy, or a dangerous tyrant? How do we reconcile his achievements with his atrocities? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this journey into the tumultuous life of Old Hickory stirred something inside you, hit that subscribe button. Because here, we're always unearthing the most compelling, controversial, and utterly vital stories that shape our world. See you in the next one.